All right, today I'm here with Trevor Wakefield, who served in the United States Army. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What years did you serve?
I served from 2006 to 2009.
Okay, so got in kind of when things were pretty heavy in the Middle East, and Trevor and I actually got a chance to speak before this, and he wanted to come on and kind of tell his story and kind of his involvement in a pretty incredible situation. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
All right.
So let's get some background on what was going on when you were in the Middle East.
Well, I was in the 10th Mountain Division, 2nd Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment, and we were deployed about 15 months to northern Iraq on a combat deployment. And during that time, we had one incident in which a lot of people were hurt. And kind of when it was all said and done, a lot of people walked away from it and they felt as though that they didn't receive necessary recognition or awards. And that's kind of what I want to tell my story, and I kind of want to tell their stories because I think that they're important stories.
Yeah, get them out there.
Yep. And so that's kind of what I want to get into. But really, before I want to tell this story, I just kind of want to take a moment and I want to pay respect to the fact that one of our soldiers did lose his life, and many people there were hurt very badly. And since then, many of the people that were there have taken their own lives. So I want to just honor that, make a note of that, and I want to honor their sacrifice.
Make sure people know about it.
Yeah.
And continue their story, because that's what it's all about. So in the incident, there was an explosion, an ID, or what was the...
We had a car bomb that came to our gate, and it had 2,000 pounds of explosives in the back. And it was equivalent in size to the one that hit the Oklahoma City building.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was
massive.
Huge.
City blocks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I mean, many of the people that were wounded there just refused to leave to help everybody else, myself included. So basically what I want to do is I want to just kind of tell you my story about what happened that day. And then I want to tell you also some of my friends' stories. And you'll kind of see where I'm going with this as we go. So I guess really the day started, I was getting out of a guard tower. I had just come off guard, and I had my machine gun, and I pulled my glasses out. I put my glasses on, and they just snapped, right? So I went to my room. I dropped my stuff. My room was right next to the gate, right? And my glasses broke. So my friends, they're going, hey, come over here, like, let's hang out, and I'm like, I got to go get more glasses. So I go to a computer, and I'm sitting there on the computer when the detonation happened, right? It was like divine intervention.
Yeah.
It was literally like, and I was sitting in a tall computer chair with my back to the window, and the chair actually shielded me from the blast.
Wow.
I blacked out momentarily, and then I woke up, and I thought it was a mortar attack, so I just ran for my life. I grabbed somebody along the way, and I took them, and we got inside of an armored personnel carrier, and I waited to see if there was going to be a second blast, because I was thinking, like, mortar attack. These things are going to keep coming.
Yeah.
And so nothing happened, so I was like, okay, I got to go. I started walking over towards the gate, and I start seeing people carrying wounded. So I just start running over there, and I hopped this wall, and then I see an individual there, and he's like in really bad shape. And I'm just like, let me help you out, I'll patch you up. And he's like, no, don't even worry about me. He's like, just go help everybody else. And I see everybody moving away from there, and I think, like, if somebody comes right now...
Crackers. Okay.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was like, if somebody comes right now, the gate was totally unguarded. I was like, we're all going to be killed.
Yeah.
And so I went in my room, which the building was destroyed, and I had to make my way inside. I got a belt-fed machine gun, and I went out there. Well, I sat there for a moment because I was feeling dizzy, and I felt like I was going to pass out. And so I kind of had, like, I couldn't see, like, there was like a fog in my eyes. So I'm like shaking my head, and I'm trying to, like, pull myself together. And I just realized, like, man, the time is now. I was like, I have to go out there. And when I walked out of the building, like, I was fully prepared to die. you know.
Yeah, because you didn't know what was out there.
Well, I knew that I saw my friends wounded, and I was like, I have to protect them, you know. So I literally jumped inside of the crater. I jumped inside of the crater with my machine gun, and I pointed out down the road because I'm thinking like, oh man, like if more people come, like at that moment we wouldn't have probably stood a chance, you know what I mean? Like, so I laid there for a little bit. People started to gather, like outside in the town, and I started firing over their heads. I was like, hey, get out of here, just letting them know, like, hey, I'm here, you know. And then one of my NCOs comes along, and he takes one look at me, and he goes, oh man, you're messed up. Because I was laying in my own puke. Like, I was puking, I had a headache, I was gonna pass out. And then so he goes, hey, he's like, somebody take Wakefield over to, you know, be evacuated. So I go in there, and they're like, hey, have a seat. And I'm sitting there with my friends who are all wounded, and they're like shaking, and they're having all these issues. I was like, man, I can't leave, you know? So I ended up just finding something to do. I just walked away from being evacuated. I never was evacuated. And so as a result, like, in the course of that day, like, I placed some more machine guns,
Really?
made the place more secure, and then me and a friend of mine, because our radios were actually knocked out. When this happened, nobody knew. Like, we had no communications. So me and my friend, we crawled up on the roof and we rebuilt the radio up there.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of my story. And then, like, after it was all said and done, that night, our building was destroyed, so we had to sleep in tents. And I went to my medic, and I was like, hey, I don't feel good. I was like, there's, like, really something wrong with me. And he just kind of looks over at his buddy like, oh, crap. And he was just kind of like, well, he's like, your eyes aren't dilated. He goes, you know, it's been a long day, and you're stressed out. Just go get some rest. And I was like, all right. And then I just kind of moved on with my life. After that time, I started having, like, these wild dreams.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't like, you know, you hear, like, PTSD, like, oh, well, he relived the war. It wasn't like that, right? I was having hallucinations. I was having, like, memory issues. I was having all these crazy problems, and I never saw a doctor. I never got to go to have a TBI test or anything. They never
neurology thing down or anything like that?
They came to us a couple times, and they were just kind of like, oh, hey, if anybody has anything wrong, like, raise your hand. But our platoon was literally half of our guys were gone.
Yeah.
Nobody would raise their hand even if there is something wrong with them because we were there for each other. You know what I mean? So if one of us would have left, we would have felt like we were abandoning everybody else, you know? And so 13 years later, it was 2021, we had an embassy that was attacked in Iraq, and some soldiers were hurt there. And I saw it on TV, and it kind of made me feel some kind of way, you know what I mean? So I ended up going to the VA. I ended up going to see a PTSD specialist, and I chat with her for a few minutes, and she just goes, she's like, I hate to tell you this. She's like, you don't have PTSD. She's like, well, maybe like a little bit. But she goes, you have brain damage, you know? And then, so then I end up making my way to a neurologist. He tells me the same thing. He's like, man, he's like, you got brain damage from that explosion you were in. And I'm just like, what? I couldn't believe it. So I went home and I looked at this award that I had. It was hanging on the wall of my office, right? And hold on, let me see if I can find it here. Basically what it says is, here it is. This is exactly how it reads. For meritorious achievement during a mass casualty situation resulting from the detonation of an SVB IED, which is a vehicle-borne IED, on a patrol base, despite his injuries, Specialist Wakefield was able to help reestablish communication and secure the patrol base, etc. So it just kind of makes you wonder, like, how can you have an award that says despite your injuries and you never get a Purple Heart?
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
The guys that got evacuated, did they get Purple Hearts? To your
Some of
knowledge?
them.
Some of them, but not all of them.
Well, that's kind of what I want to get into is because I started reaching out to other people, and I realized that I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to tell you some of these other guys' stories because I think that all of my friends, nobody likes to be called a hero.
No, but you still.
No.
But I think the closure that you guys could get with that day would come with that. It's not about being boisted up and hey, this guy is the man. It's more about acknowledgement of what you did, kind of what that reward says.
Yeah.
But it's not all the way in the right direction.
Yeah.
Kind of like a lot of these Vietnam veterans that I've taken out to lunch that have been dealing with cancer because of Agent Orange.
Yeah.
And never recognized.
I'm really glad that you actually mentioned that. When I was 10 years old, my grandfather, he died of Agent Orange.
Mm-hmm.
He was a jet mechanic, and he would go help the other guys that would have problems with the planes that would spray the stuff. And he used to get that stuff all over his skin. And when I was 10 years old, I watched my grandfather die the most absolutely terrible death. And I worked for a couple years in hospice.
Mm-hmm.
And I still never saw anything as brutal
God,
as,
breaks my heart.
Yeah.
We mentioned talked about my stepfather before this. He shared with me some of those things, just like you shared with me now, about the situations in which those things happen, and what you guys are willing to do, because that's part of what this is. Again, it's what we do here is a human story. This is your experience relative to you and how it impacted you and those you love and everyone around you. I've taken guys to lunch that served in Germany from like 84 to 88, and they were like, bro, it was fucking great, went to shows all the time, I hung out with chicks, and I'm not a hero. And I'm like, no, listen, bar none what happens to you in the world, at that point in your life you were willing to sacrifice your life for your country and others that you stand next to. That's it.
Yeah.
If you're willing to do that, you're better than probably 90% of this country, right, in that decision, because 90% of them aren't going to do that.
Yeah.
That's just fact, whether they want to or not. And so I think, man, I really wish I had a direction to point you in, because ultimately I wouldn't even know where to start. Because if you're not against anything. I don't think it's a question of belief, or you're against someone that's just saying no. I think your story might be a lot more common than you think.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys, stepfather included, that were in stuff that we'll never know about, that probably affect him more than the situations where he had to basically take an armed insurrectionist, stick his knee on his tech, pull out his service revolver, and point it in every direction of all the villagers running at him and saying, if you guys move, I'll kill every single one of you, and hold him down until he got support.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no reward for that.
Yeah.
But in that moment in time, things like that impress on ourselves, and it's all relative to the person. What you went through is horrific.
Yeah.
The idea that you're sitting here with me today because your glasses broke is a miracle.
I know.
Hands down. The guys that survived with you, same time and place, 1,000%. Stepfather, same deal. It's a miracle. I guess the only thing that, have you ever written to any of our reps, congressmen, representatives?
I have. It's always kind of been like, they just want to kind of, they'll point me in the right direction, but they'll be like, well, the Army has a process for this. And I had to wait 2 years for a decision that I did not feel like was, fully to my benefit, if I'll just say that.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, ultimately, like I said, it sucks in this life where you do things because they're the right thing to do, and then it goes unnoticed, right?
Yeah.
And I completely sympathize with your story, and of course, thank you for your service and what you did for our country, and the guys that stood up for you and the ones that didn't make it. It breaks my heart, because that's not the way it should be. We don't want to get into that, but my suggestion would be to just keep on hitting the reps, keep on hitting the senators, hit them every week, send an email every week, get in their face, and be as persistent as you possibly can until they can't ignore you any longer.
Yeah, that's what I found.
And if you need me to stand up with you, call me. I'll be there all day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all we can do.
Yeah.
But understand this. I see it, and that's all that matters. Because ultimately, what I tell my people with what I do, because you get people, there weren't 1,000 people there. That sucks. Wow, when there are 1,000 people at our concert, what the hell? What's wrong with us? Did you get one person there? Well, yeah, then you won.
Yeah.
Did you help save one life? You won.
Yeah.
Fuck everybody else.
Yeah.
It don't matter. They don't matter. What you did matters that day, and the fact that you can carry that with you and what the choices that you make got you through that. It's all that matters.
Yeah.
Screw everybody else. They're not you.
Yeah.
It don't matter. It does not matter, because ultimately those guys remember you for that. And that brotherhood that you have will mean more, in my opinion. And again, it's relative. That's your choice to make. But for me, that's what matters to me. You get awards, you get accolades. I don't care about those things. I go by the intern. I'm 42 years old, and I go by the intern, and I've done it for 20 years.
Yeah.
Names, titles, awards mean nothing to me. It's the people that I can take care of, and in things like this, try to help where I can. That's all that I can do.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think you did that. So I hope you guys get the recognition that you solely deserve, because you definitely deserve it. And like I said, anything and everything I can, I would do. Having a stepfather in the military for so long, fighting those battles as well, I can tell you it's not an easy battle. But you can't give up, and if you want it, you're going to have to push and 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 push until you can't push, and then you're going to push more, because that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, our government is so massive and so big, and then you put the military in that too, and everything that it has to go through it's not easy, and it breaks my heart, because ultimately you are what make it work. Guys like you are what make it work, and have what made it work since we declared our independence in the 1700s. That's all that it is. And I just wish, I hope you get the recognition you deserve, but understand that you are getting it now. And that's all that matters. Because as long as you can look your wife in your eye and she knows the person you are, and you can look in the mirror and you know the type of person you are, everybody else.
Yeah.
That is none of their business, and it don't matter.
Well, some of these guys, I want other people to know what kind of men they are. You know,
I understand that too.
Not only did a lot of these guys now have children, I feel like several of these guys reside in Texas, where if you have a Purple Heart in Texas, your kids get free college educations. And it's kind of
and that's what you're fighting for now.
That's what I think.
I get it.
I want them to have those benefits. Veterans, because I explained to you what my grandpa went through with Agent Orange. If it wasn't for him having that documented, my grandmother would have just been living out on the streets.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to afford it.
Because that he was able to have that documented through the Department of Veterans Affairs, it worked out in the end. And my thing is having that experience in my mind. If something happens to me or my friends later on, like neurologically, I want this documented. That way, we're taken care of.
Your family's protected, and they're protected.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes 100% true. And it sucks too. Again, back to your story, the idea that at that moment when he said you need to be checked out, you said, "No, I'm not leaving because this isn't right, and then I'm not going to leave these guys until I know it's right."
Yeah.
And now you're paying for that, which is crazy to me, because ultimately that is the true sign of a warrior is, dude, your arm's missing. I don't care. I'm not going to leave here until we know we're secure and we can go to bed.
Yeah. Even when I found out I had brain damage, my first thought was like, man, what about my friends? Like, they were like right there, I just can't forget any of it.
No.
It's just wild. Let me tell you a story about one of my other friends on that note. Okay. So I have this other friend. His name is Sackett. Sackett was literally blown through a wall. All right. He hit his head when he was going through the wall, and then he also received the concussion from the blast, right? So he was blown through a wall, and they found him in the rubble, and he refused to leave. He's like, I'm not leaving. He basically rallied the men around him, and he's like, come on, we got to get our wounded into this building, and they started administering aid to these guys. And my friend Sackett saved our first sergeant's life. People saw it. Like,
Yeah.
I have witness statements saying that they saw this happen, you know. And then all of our radios were knocked out. Sackett was like, Wakefield, come on, we gotta go put this radio up on the building, and so we can have more communication to coordinate this whole thing. He passed out in my arms, right? Losing consciousness. I thought he was going blind. And I was like, hey, you got to take this guy. He passed out, right? This guy literally blown through a wall, saved somebody's life, reestablished our communications on the base. He got a Purple Heart. That's it. He never got anything else. Never got a
Medal of Honor.
He should have
Valor,
got
at
a
least.
Bronze Star,
Yeah, at
like
least.
something. And
Yeah.
it was when I was like, hey, I got to make a case for myself for traumatic brain injury. I contacted him, like, can you just write me a statement? And he writes me a statement, and I just realized it was just like, oh my God, that guy's a hero. I was like, what? When I read his statement, it was like a movie. I was like, this is so crazy. I was like, this guy deserves something.
Yeah, and
You
you
know.
do. My best piece of advice: contact those guys who are passionate about it. You guys get a lawyer, someone to draft you a letter, and you guys incessantly hit them at every level, every week, and just present it the way you presented it to me.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you're going to get in someone's ear that's going to say the same thing I did and say this is bullshit and we need to rectify it.
Yeah.
What does it cost for me to say, as a taxpayer, I want to make sure that you're protected and your family's protected? Nothing.
Well, I'll tell you this.
So I'll do it all day.
When I was in the Army, they used to always say if you didn't like something, you're supposed to write your congressman about it. Like, hey, buddy, you don't like it, write your congressman. And maybe you
That's the
might
joke.
be in turn.
That's the joke.
Maybe you should write a letter to your
I'll
congressman.
do it all day. All day. Give me the evidence. I'll send it to him all day.
So here-
Without question. I mean, again, like, you can have my signature on anything. It's like I said, these guys, it's not a good thing, and it needs to be fixed.
Let me tell you about my squad leader. His name was Sergeant Richards, right? Sergeant Richards he was only about 10 feet away from me. He was knocked unconscious in the explosion. He had suffered a cut to the back of his neck from stuff that like flew in the window. And he was bleeding, and then like he basically coordinated the whole effort for, you know, all these people that were coming and going all of a sudden to get all these wounded out of there and stuff. He has his award, and it says, despite his injuries, you know, Staff Sergeant Richards. And it's like, well, again, like, how did you not get a Purple Heart for that? And this guy went on, he served 20 years, multiple combat deployments, never received a Purple Heart. And I'm just like, man, I want to get that guy a Purple Heart.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be perfectly honest with you. When I was in the Army with that guy, I did not like him. But that's how strongly I feel about this. It's not really a matter of like injecting my feelings into this. It's like me as a patriot. I look at this and I go, man, that guy deserves a Purple Heart.
Yeah, he's a
You know?
warrior. He deserves it. You all do.
Yeah.
Well, you draft that letter. I'll sign one and send it to the congressman as well. And anything I can do to help you fight, I will. Just let me know.
Yeah.
But above all else, you are a hero. And thank you so much for your service.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.